A quick disclaimer before we begin, the PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome to episode 22 of the PEMF podcast.
And hopefully by the end of today's episode, you will know everything that you need to know to either start your PEMF journey or maybe even just help you along the way if you're already on that. But before we kind of go into any of the benefits about PEMF or kind of anything like that, we're going to start with actually how the therapy works and kind of really break it down really simply. So hopefully you can fully understand every aspect of PEMF. But we'll just start off with, what does PEMF stand for?
So PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy.
And how do the devices actually make these magnetic fields?
So typically you have a device which has copper coils built within the device. You put a small charge at a certain frequency through those copper coils, and that creates a magnetic field similar to that of the Earth's natural magnetic fields.
Okay, so you spoke about these devices. How can you actually apply these devices? Is it something that you sit on, or how does it work?
So typically you get full body devices and you get localized devices. So a localized device we would describe as something you can apply to a certain area of the body. So something maybe you can apply to your knee or an elbow, and you can either use it on the go or it may need to be plugged in. Full body devices is exactly as it sounds. So it's laying on a mat or maybe a couch or a sofa that's got built-in PEMF therapy coils into it.
So now we've kind of covered how you actually apply it and what it is. Let's kind of go into a little bit more of now like the specs of PEMF devices. And we'll start off with the one that kind of gets spoken about the most, which is frequency, which you've kind of already mentioned. What actually is the frequency?
So the frequency is about the pulse per second rate. So we're talking about, with PEMF devices, typically these are very low frequency. So when we hear about EMFs, we're actually thinking about higher frequency devices like mobiles, microwaves, that sort of thing. But when we talk about frequency, when it comes to PEMF, we talk about super low frequencies. The Earth's natural frequency is around 8 hertz, actually 7.8, which is the Schumann resonance. And typically with PEMF devices, it's about 1 to 30 hertz are seen as the most natural frequencies. And often devices can go up to 50 or 100 hertz in a good PEMF system.
Okay, so we won't go too much now into kind of the effects PEMF kind of has on the body and maybe some of the benefits that you might get from PEMF. But what effect does kind of frequency have on the PEMF devices, if any?
So generally frequency within the PEMF devices, it depends on when you're using it throughout the day in a lot of systems. So we have brainwave states, and in the morning, we're typically running on a beta state, which is around sort of 13 to 35 hertz. And we want to apply PEMF therapy to within those frequency ranges. As we go through to the evening, we move into alpha, which is around 8 to 13 hertz, and then theta. And then when we're sleeping, it's moving into the delta states, which is low as like 4 hertz and below. So we want to try and apply a device that works within those ranges, that doesn't knock out our circadian rhythm. But applying the PEMF at those frequencies is going to influence a healing. An older way of doing PEMF therapy and a lot of older devices tend to select one frequency. And some studies will only use one frequency to fix certain conditions. And people tend to lean towards like having this book of frequencies that is linked to these different conditions. But we're moving away from that now. We're moving into more of applying multiple frequencies through these devices, but applied throughout the time of day. And just applying these frequencies is better that our body isn't getting used to one frequency. So it's being access to a range of different frequencies, and that way it's benefiting us the most.
Just to kind of like summarize then, the main goal with selecting different frequencies is more just about changing brainwave states.
Yeah, exactly that.
So what normally comes with frequency is the intensity. And what actually is intensity?
So intensity is effectively the strength of that system, and it's measured usually in Gauss. So it's the strength of the magnetic field that comes from it.
And what kind of, like we did with frequency, what kind of effect does this have on the therapy?
Intensity, generally, we see that higher intensity devices end up in clinics because they get quite a quick turnaround, quite a quick result. And lower intensity devices are suited better for the home, so people can apply them once, twice a day, and get those effects rather than seeing them in clinics once a week.
And just maybe for a bit of perspective for people, what kind of numbers is this? Like, what kind of number in Gauss are they using in clinics compared to what you might see at home?
So typical low intensity devices, quite a lot of low intensity devices on the market that are around 1 Gauss or 1 to 10 Gauss. That's what we would class as like a low intensity device. Anything less than 1 Gauss, we personally don't really recommend. You can get about 0.5 Gauss intensity from the earth naturally. So you can just lay on the grass and get that kind of intensity anyway. Going up from like 10 Gauss to 100 Gauss is kind of classed as like a medium range intensity, and 100 Gauss and higher is often classed as a higher intensity device. But in clinics, you tend to see devices that are around sort of 2 to 3,000 Gauss and above, just because those devices warrant a response from the muscles, so that people can actually feel the therapy, and it has a bit more of an effect on blocking pain signals, so that people walk out of that session and won't need to come back for quite as often.
So now we've kind of got the main two kind of basics of PMF. We'll move on into the more kind of like smaller sides of it as such, like the less spoken about. And we'll start with waveform. What actually is the waveform?
So the waveform is actually the shape of the pulse that comes through. So it's like the pulse of each frequency. So it's almost like if we looked at those pulses through an oscilloscope, we would see those different shapes, and they're described by either sawtooth, square wave, sinusoidal, which is more of an S shape. So it's more of the shape of the wave.
Okay. So you said of all these different kinds of waves, is there one that maybe is better or one that is preferred by the industry, or is there kind of no difference in them?
So we've been selling PMF devices for around 10 years now, and we've seen many different devices. We've used many different devices, all in different waveforms. Typically, square wave is quite a popular wave because it was originally used by NASA in a lot of their research. So people tend to go for the square wave just because of that link. But to be completely honest with you, we see results with all different waves. So it's not like we're saying, yes, you should go a square wave, a sawtooth. We see massive results different between these different waves. Actually, we see benefits with pretty much all of them. So most of the manufacturers will kind of drive you towards their wave, and they'll say that it's unique and it's been proven and all this sort of thing. But from someone who's sold many different devices, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference to warrant me to kind of push you towards one.
Another kind of thing that falls, I think, into the same category as waveform is the polarity. You don't always see this kind of listed in PMF devices, but it's a good thing to kind of know about. So what is the polarity?
So the polarity, when you have your copper coil and you put the pulse through this copper coil, depending on which direction the pulse is going through this coil, it will create a magnetic field coming from one side will be north and the other side will be south. And your magnetic field will effectively come out of the north, return around and back into the south. If you're looking at a picture of the Earth and you're looking at the poles and you see those lines that go from the north to the south, it's exactly what's happening in those copper coils. So from laying on a system, one side typically is going to be north and the other side is typically going to be south.
And with north or south, is there any preferable one again? Like within the industry, is it always north or always south? Like
again, for us, there's devices that you can change the polarity, so you can switch them around, so you can have the south facing up, north facing down, so that the body is getting predominantly the south facing poles instead of the north facing poles. When it comes to actually making a big difference, again, someone who's sold many different devices, we've done all these different things. We've tried anecdotal results with just applying north one week, just applying south the next week. You tend to get the same results because effectively you're just getting the same pulse, whether it's coming from the north side or it's circling around and coming back through the south side of that magnet.
So they're kind of all the main kind of basics of PMFs, like when it comes down to like the specs, if you're maybe looking to buy one or kind of comparing devices. But now we're kind of, maybe for people who might not have ever used PMF, they might be thinking, how often am I actually going to have to use this? You've kind of given a variety of kind of timeframes. How often is someone going to have to use this maybe in their home or in their day-to-day life?
So typically we define that by intensity. If you've got a super high intensity device that's like, in the thousands of Gauss, then typically you would only use that once a day. You don't need to apply that multiple times a day. And in those intensities, we would say like once a day, maybe in the morning, because they seem to have a bit of a stimulating effect. So you wouldn't want to affect your sleep that evening if you're using a super high intensity device. Most people have the budget for low intensity devices, and they're the ones that you see at home. And typically you can apply those for around 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And that would be once or twice a day, even 3 times a day, depending on what you're trying to achieve. If someone is chronically ill and their body's in a state of crisis, then we would usually say to them, use a PEMF device twice or 3 times a day. The effects of the PEMF devices usually last for 8 hours. So everything that it does to your blood and to your cells will tend to stick around for about 8 hours. So if you can spread that out throughout the day, then you can have those benefits continuously. However, if you're just using it for a healthy lifestyle, once a day, 10 minutes, 20 minutes is absolutely fine. So this doesn't have to define your life using PEMF system.
So you kind of talk about people seeing like effects of the PEMF, like maybe in the higher intensities a little bit quicker compared to the low intensities. You kind of got to use it more and the effects come on a little bit slower. As like a general kind of thing, how quick may people start to kind of see the benefits of PEMF or see it kind of affecting their body?
So PEMF isn't like a painkiller. We're not just blocking pain signals. We're actually looking at fixing the issue, the core problem. So we're sending the signals, changing the cell responses, encouraging the body's natural healing process. So this isn't a silver bullet that you turn it on and everything's fixed. Generally, we would say within 2 weeks, people will notice a big difference. So if you're applying a PEMF device on a daily basis and on those frequencies that we're saying to you, whether you're chronically ill or whether you're just using it for, accelerating health, then 2 weeks is that kind of golden period where people start to notice maybe a reduction in pain, they're sleeping better, more energy throughout the day. But we at NewMed, we actually offer a 30-day return policy because we know that people kind of want that time to notice those differences. And typically when people buy devices from us, we have a very, very, very low return rate. So within 30 days, people will have noticed a significant difference.
Okay, great. Kind of maybe onto one of our last points now. I feel like this is maybe quite an overlooked kind of aspect of PEMF or PEMF devices, but it's actually like the programs. Is there anything when you're maybe looking to get a device or looking at a device you already have, anything like to do with programs? Is there anything you might look for if a device has certain programs or has certain abilities like customization or kind of anything like that?
My advice for PEMF therapy is always try and keep it simple. There are devices out there that overcomplicate things. If you want, like hooking it up to your laptop and creating your own programs is a complete overkill if you're just using it at home. If you can find a device that uses a number of different frequencies in a small amount of programs, so maybe there's one that has a program that runs at a specific time of day, or maybe there's one of 5 programs. One of them is called vitalization, one of them is called sleep, all these sorts of things. You know that they're nice and simple to use. You're applying the PEMF and you're not overcomplicating things. If you want to replicate a study and you have seen a certain frequency that you want to use over a certain duration, then you may want to look for a device that offers individual frequencies. You can set them up. But in general, just keep it simple. Find a device that has a minimum amount of programs and one that utilizes a number of different frequencies when it's on.
Now we've kind of covered all the basic kind of fundamentals of PEMF. If you do want to deep dive maybe a little bit more on frequency, go check out our frequency episode. It's maybe episode 2 or 3, but we've done episodes on intensity, polarity, etc. So give a scroll through and you'll be able to find it. But now we'll kind of move maybe on to more the applications of PEMF for people and kind of what we actually see people using PEMF for. And what kind of is that? Is it maybe, do people use it for pain? Are they using it for sleep? What's the kind of general applications?
So I'll try and summarize PEMF as a whole first. So PEMF as we've mentioned, it stands for pulse electromagnetic field therapy. It's a non-invasive treatment that involves the use of electromagnetic fields to stimulate healing and improve overall wellness. So PEMF is based on the principle that electromagnetic fields can influence the body's electrical and chemical processes at a cellular level. So we're looking at creating an environment within the body using pulsed electromagnetic fields to quicker repair, basically. During a PEMF session, the device generates the electromagnetic pulses, which are directed through the body. These pulses, as we mentioned, can vary in frequency, intensity, and duration, and it all depends on the outcomes for the user. So let's look at the main applications that you asked for PEMF and who is basically using these and what for. We'll look at pain management. PEMF therapy is commonly used to alleviate pain associated with conditions such as arthritis, injuries, neuropathy, and musculoskeletal disorders. So it has been approved by the FDA for a number of different disorders within pain management. So another main application would be inflammation reduction. So PEMF therapy does have a massive anti-inflammatory effect, which can also reduce the pain that we mentioned before. Another application we would say is enhanced recovery. So athletes and individuals recovering from injuries often use PEMF therapy to speed up the healing process. So a lot of athletes get DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and recovery time is really important for them. So they can use PEMF therapy to enhance and speed up their recovery. Also improve circulation. PEMF therapy can help blood flow and circulation, which is really beneficial for tissue oxygenation. That helps with nutrient delivery. It helps with the removal of the waste from cells and getting the nutrients into those cells. Bone healing is also super effective with PEMF therapy. So the FDA actually approved PEMF therapy for non-union fractures, and a non-union fracture is a bone that's broken and just won't heal by itself. So applying PEMF therapy can actually encourage that bone to heal. But it's also super beneficial for treating things like fractures, osteoporosis, and other bone-related conditions. Also, stress reduction and relaxation. So some people are using PEMF therapy to reduce stress, and there's been studies used for PEMF therapy on depression, and it's also been approved for certain conditions that are helping to calm the mind. Lastly, really a good one to mention would be that it's increasing performance and ATP production. So it can do this through enhancing cellular metabolism, improving mitochondrial function, and increasing oxygenation, which is the activation of enzymes, as well as supporting cellular repair and regeneration. So there's a number of different things that PEMF therapy can do. And pretty much just through passing those electromagnetic fields through the body, we can encourage the body's natural process to do all these different things.
Great explanation of all of those things. People now might be thinking, this sounds great. I'm going to get all these great benefits, but what's the catch? Where's the side effects? Are there any?
So the good thing with PEMF therapy is that there's actually no known side effects whatsoever. So what we're doing within PEMF therapy is enhancing the body's natural ability to do all these processes. We do always recommend that you speak to a GP before you use a PEMF therapy device, just in case you've got any underlying health conditions that you're not aware of. And also a complete contraindicator is if you have a pacemaker. So obviously an electrical implanted device over something like the heart, you don't want to put any kind of electrical stimulation through there just in case.
And maybe just for anyone who's wondering, can you overdose on this as well? Like you mentioned, having 2 or 3 sessions a day. If you have 4, is that too many? Is there a too much kind of amount?
So there's not really a way of overdosing PEMF therapy, especially at the lower intensity devices that you tend to find in the home. But there just isn't really a point to sit on a PEMF device all day. The effects of the PEMF session usually happen within about 8 to 10 minutes. So the cells will start to separate. You'll get the positively charged cells. All those sorts of things will happen within that first period. If you lay on a device for longer than that, it kind of just isn't too much use. So spreading those sessions out, we would recommend. So if you're doing 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, that's more recommended.
Okay, great. I thought they were 2 important points to also add on to the end. Just obviously where PEMF, as you said, is now kind of becoming a lot more popular in the home compared to the clinics. Obviously, people want to know if there's any kind of cautions to using it. But if you do have any more questions about PEMF or anything that we've covered in this episode, make sure to leave it below this episode and we'll make sure to answer it in our next PEMF Talk episode, which is actually a mini series we do where we answer your PEMF related questions. But if you haven't already, make sure to drop us a follow on whatever platform you're listening from and make sure to leave us a 5-star review.
Thanks for listening.